After escaping from the war in Ukraine, hundreds of Nigerian students finish their coursework online and share stories of hope and survival with teachers and classmates still under fire.
Top honors for Nigeria's most diligent taxpayers. President Muhammadu Buhari pays recognition to 20 top taxpayers for carrying out their civic duties and urges more Nigerians to get into the tax net.
Cleaning up at the public transportation with the first African-designed and manufactured electronic bus, vowing that Kenya is just the first stop. Makers hope to hit the road across Africa.
Hello, and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by my colleague from the Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Paul Liho at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Channels Television in Lagos brings you that story.
President Muhammadu Buhari has recognized 20 taxpayers for due diligence in carrying out their civic obligation, paying their taxes. Speaking at the second annual tax dialogue held in Abuja, the nation's capital, the president lauded the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, for exceeding its 2021 target and generating 6.4 trillion naira in taxes for the year, and urged more Nigerians to get into the tax net. Our State House correspondent, Kayla Megwa, reports.
Stakeholders in Nigeria's tax space are gathered here at the Banquet Hall of State House in Abuja for a second national dialogue on how taxation can be harmonized for enhanced revenue generation. The Federal Inland Revenue Service believes this dialogue is crucial as most of the taxable public are not in Nigeria's tax net. The executive chairman of the service makes a plea to the president.
We humbly invite the president to step in to dissuade political tax gladiators to sheath their swords. Tax revenue is an inherently a political issue. It should be treated as such by all.
This dialogue will honor Nigeria's top 20 taxpayers. However, Nigeria's debt profile keeps rising. The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, says there's a direct link between non-payment of taxes and Nigeria's debt structure.
There is a need, therefore, for us to appeal to both individuals or corporates who have a responsibility to pay their taxes to continue to do so. Because it is only when we do so that we are able to raise revenue to fend for our people. It is very important that we do this, otherwise the government will have no choice in an attempt to ensure that it fends for the people or meets the needs of the people, will have to borrow.
President Muhammadu Buhari praises the Federal Inland Revenue Service for their achievements in 2021. He notes that revenue generation via taxes is crucial for national development, calling for ease of tax compliance and an end to multiple taxation.
It is my expectation that the discussions at this 2022 National Tax Dialogue will be focused on what we must do to maximize legitimate revenue collection and massively improve the tax to GDP ratio. We must therefore improve tax revenue without necessarily raising new taxes.
Now, there are issues with the tax structure in Nigeria, and that's what dialogues like this one are supposed to actually address. Mr. President there saying that he would welcome any idea that ensures that taxes are paid without taxes being raised. It is hoped that honoring these particular Nigerians who are said to be the highest taxpayers in the country will encourage other entities to do the same. From the Banquet Hall of State House in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Joining us to discuss this is a developmental economist, Kola Ogunleye. Glad to have you today on Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
Right. So how do we bridge the link between, non-payment of taxes and the country's debt structure?
Bridging the link between these two issues, two figures. I mean, we are looking at very high debt figures, high debt service figure, and then we have a low revenue situation. A particularly important way to address that is to try as much as possible to bring more people into the tax net. Because in our country today, we can't even begin to think of increasing the tax rate. That will do a lot of damage to the demand function of the average citizen. So what we can do is, those who are not in the tax net right now, let's bring them into the tax net. So many people in Nigeria are still outside the tax net.
Right. So this tax net, it seems elusive. So how does the FIRS begin to strategize to ensure it gets more people to pay up on their taxes?
What the FIRS should do is to penetrate informal sector too. Use data analytics a lot more. Everybody talks about digital. Fine, you can digitalize a lot of things. Oh, we have digitalized tax clearance certificate. We have digitalized payment system. But one of the things that you can use to really get into the informal sector and get more people into the tax net is what is called AI, artificial intelligence, whereby you employ data analytics. There are experts called data analysts, that are well trained in this particular exercise, who will enable FIRS to penetrate that sector. We need to be able to say that when Mrs. A is sitting down there, he has a unique number with which that with that number linked to his so-called BVN number, you can begin to look at what is going on around him, and you can then tax. You can then be able to tax him.
So how do we work, across the regions, like this particular, strategy they call tax harmonization? How do we begin to make the necessary adjustments to ensure that we capture all taxable persons
one thing about our country is that we like to throw around the concepts as if they are new. Right from the inception of taxation in this country, it has always been known, in spite of true federalism or regionalism or whatever you call it, because this is what led to harmonization, that there will be need for harmonization. And therefore, a body was set up called the Joint Tax Board, with the chairman being the FIRS chairman, and other revenue bodies in the country are members of that Joint Tax Board. So we need to harmonize. They should make use of the Joint Tax Board more, and also set up fora whereby they will meet most of the time. The efficiency of collection will be enhanced if you harmonize. The productivity will be enhanced. Then the cost itself will be reduced. And then after all that, you put it in a big basket, and then you share it in accordance with certain criteria. And of course, the federal government, being the big boss, must be able to give way in some areas, reach compromises that will enable the states to cooperate with them in the overall interest.
All right, so it's, bring all to the bag, you say. That's an interesting concept. So tax brings money to the bag, crude oil brings money to the bag. You just said that the oil is dwindling or prices are dwindling. What other ways can we make money as a government apart from crude oil
in this
taxation?
Country today, we have a neglected certain set of taxes, and which we need to do. The elites have to wake up to their responsibility in terms of conspicuous consumption taxation. There's a lot of conspicuous consumption that is going on in the economy that is not being taxed. We see a lot of estates all over the place. Is there property taxation on those estates? Are they paying taxes on those? Are the ways people, the governments make money all over the world. We can't be more Catholic than the Pope. So if we are in this country now and we are talking of, free enterprise, don't let us overtax them, the big men in the country must pay their fair share. Right. That must happen. And a deliberate effort must be put in place to catch them.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Developmental expert Kola Ogunleye joining us today on Africa 54. Yeah.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I am Paul Indiho in Washington, filling in for Vincent Makori. Climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year between 2030 and 2050, according to the World Health Organization. Observers say children and youth are more susceptible to its effects than adults, with immediate and lifelong impacts on their physical and mental health.
Climate change is disrupting many lives around the world. The change in climatic conditions, change in weather patterns, and the increased frequency of weather-related disasters such as floods and forest fires are causing eco-anxiety in people. The American Psychological Association defines eco-anxiety as the chronic fear of environmental doom, and young people are experiencing the condition.
Recent statistics from Avast show that about 75% of young people are afraid of how the future is going to look like in terms of climate change. So the young people are definitely worried, and the way we continue to delay action, then we continue to also impact the mental health of these young people.
Experts say eco-anxiety is exacerbated by striking images of the adverse effects of climate change that people often find in the media. But there is more.
Young people are not anxious solely because the future is dire. They're anxious because of the inaction of their leaders, the inaction of decision makers. That's what is anxiety raising. It's not so much that there's doomsday scenario.
Wanjira Mathai is Vice President and Regional Director for Africa at the World Resources Institute. She says more should be done to lessen anxiety due to climate change among the youth.
If they knew we were doing what we need to do, taking it seriously, addressing issues of climate finance, addressing adaptation, addressing loss and damage, and putting finance on the table like we did in the post-COVID recovery, they would be okay.
Meanwhile, in a new report, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that the world is only beginning to see the devastating effects of climate change. And UNICEF warns children are at risk.
Reducing emissions is the only long-term solution. And at the same time, that will come too late for the generation of kids that are being born now. And the best thing we can do for those children is to ensure that we're getting these basics right, that water and sanitation, health, education, and ensuring that these services are resilient to climate impacts. If we care about kids, you really have to care about climate change.
The Russia-Ukraine war is taking a toll on the economies of the world and casting a grim shadow on Tunisians as empty supermarket shelves and queues at bakeries resulting from wheat shortages persist amidst a deepening political and financial crisis. As Tunisia seeks a foreign rescue package, an IMF deal will be seen as vital to unlocking other possible bilateral financial assistance from donors that have repeatedly bailed out the country in recent years.
58-year-old Lofty Ajmi has been running a small bakery shop in the Tunisian capital for 20 years and says he can no longer find flour or semolina to bake bread, which has severely impacted his sales.
It's affected us so much, the war in Ukraine, that we can no longer work. Before this war, I could secure semolina every day in the range of 50 or 60 kilograms and make bread. With the war, we could no longer find even a little of the semolina for us to work. This is a big crisis.
The crisis forced the father of three to close his shop for 2 weeks as he could not secure flour. He only worked for 13 days this month. Tunisia faces a political and economic crisis as President Kais Saied focuses on rewriting the constitution after instituting one-man rule despite warnings of imminent collapse in public finances that threaten national bankruptcy. Economic analyst Ridha Chikandeli says the conflict in Ukraine has three repercussions on the country.
There are financial repercussions on the trade deficit because the cost of importing oil and grain has risen. and these will lead to a decline in the value of the Tunisian dinar.
A small team of IMF staff visited Tunisia last week for further discussions about a possible IMF-supported finance program. Nevertheless, Tunisia's powerful UGTT union informed the delegation that it rejected the government's reform proposals, especially lifting subsidies and freezing wages and hiring. An IMF deal is seen as vital to unlock other possible bilateral financial assistance from donors that have repeatedly bailed out Tunisia over recent years.
It's time for a short break. As we do, remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and other programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come on the program, hit by soaring prices in wheat, flour and liquefied cooking gas, food vendors in Kenya strain as conflicts between the world's two big grain and energy exporters, Russia and Ukraine, goes on.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I am Paul Indihor, filling in for Vincent McCory, who is on assignment in Washington, D.C. Hundreds of Nigerian students who safely fled Ukraine were close to graduating when Russia invaded the country. But despite being under fire, some Ukrainian teachers have continued their classes online, where they are exchanging stories of hope and survival. Timothy Obiozu reports from Abuja.
Final year medical student from Ukraine, Dominic Oru, was 2 months short of completing his degree when Russian forces invaded Ukraine. Like hundreds of others from his city, he fled to Romania and returned to Nigeria in early March. Since then, Oru and his colleagues have resumed their classes online, but only after a reunion following their sudden departure.
So our major conversation was about how we didn't get to have a proper goodbye to each other, because we're thinking that, we still had time. There was going to be the graduation ceremony where we're going to have like pictures and everything.
Still, Oru says he is keeping his hopes high, despite worrying about his teacher in Ukraine, who is doubling as a frontline responder.
He looks really, really very stressed. He looked like he had like very little amount of sleep. You could see the eye bags around his eyes. For my class, which I had on Monday, like about 30 minutes to the end of the class, he got a call and of course he excused himself.
Nigerian authorities said around 8,000 nationals were in Ukraine when the invasion began. About 5,000 of them were students. Freshman medical student Fatima Bafa has started virtual learning as well, catching up on her studies and with her friends. But for her, it's not the same.
So I really miss attending my physical classes, seeing my friends, and my teachers.
Fatima's parents say she must stay out of Ukraine.
We can't take her back. We need the place that she studies peacefully, because my daughter, she's still young. She's just 16 years.
Oru and his colleagues were planning a big dinner party to celebrate their graduation, but now he fears he may never see some of his classmates again. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
As the conflict between the world's two big grain and energy exporters, Russia and Ukraine, goes on, food vendors in Kenya are being hit by soaring prices in wheat flour and liquefied cooking gas. Kenyans have seen a steep rise in food prices over the past months and only hope that this hike in commodity prices will go away the way it has come.
Kobe, 23, comes from a mountainous area in western Kenya. He arrived in the capital, Nairobi, a year ago to work as a chef at a breakfast eatery. He makes chapati, a wheat-based leavened flatbread and fried triangle-shaped pastry, which is popular breakfast food in Kenya. For Kobe and the likes, they have been forced to swallow the soaring cost of ingredients such as flour and cooking oil in recent weeks.
Previously, we were buying the packet 140. For now it is 180. And the salad, we used to buy around 180 per liter, but for now 300 shillings, it's really tough for us.
Besides the ingredients, the price of liquefied gas has almost doubled, forcing Kobe to seek for an alternative fuel option. With raging operating costs, Kobe is suffering substantial income loss, making it more difficult to support his family. Having lost his father when he was in grade 2 at the primary school, Kobe is now the breadwinner to his mother and 3 sisters who are back in their hometown.
I am the one whom they are depending on. Previously, I was getting around 1,000 shillings. For now, I do half of that.
At the beginning of March, the price of 13 kilograms of liquefied gas, which can last 2 weeks, has risen from 2,700 shillings to 3,340, up around 20%.
The staples we have in Kenya are wheat. Wheat is used to make bread, is to make chapati, is to make all these things. 80% of wheat in Kenya is imported from many countries, and one of the biggest suppliers is Russia.
As a country that heavily depends on imported food, the escalating conflict between Russia and Ukraine, 2 major food exporters, has posed a severe challenge to Kenya.
Swedish-Kenyan group Opibus has introduced the first African-designed and manufactured electronic bus in Kenya, with the aim of cleaning up polluting public transportation. Opibus are Kenya's first company to make electronic motorcycles, plans to launch the bus commercially in a few months and bring it to markets across Africa by 2023. Juma Muganja reports from Nairobi.
As other vehicles jostle for space while belching clouds of dark smoke in the streets of Nairobi, Benjamin Maina is driving a unique bus, one that is fully electric.
I feel privileged driving this vehicle. It's also very amazing when you are driving this vehicle compared to the fossil fuels vehicles, considering there is a lot of vibrations on fossil fuel vehicles and also a lot of noise. But with this vehicle, it's quite silent and very sleek.
Public transport in Kenya and across the African continent is largely run informally with no emission standards in place, making the vehicles highly pollutive.
If you look at the cities, the heavy-duty vehicles, which are buses and trucks, that's the bulk of the pollution, you know. So they are a big contributor to pollution. But as I said, they're also an opportunity, because how do we shift to cleaner modes? How do we shift? Because we need mass transport to be sustainable, to make cities more sustainable.
The introduction of electric buses into the African market by Opibus is aimed at remedying the situation.
This electric bus is a really important first step in the transition from fossil fuel vehicles to electric, clean mobility, right? And I think we really show precedence being the first movers in this market with a bus that's even locally developed.
The ride today is one of its own, having ridden on an electric vehicle. It's just cool, no noises like the combustion engines. There are no smells like the combustion engine. So it's just cool and awesome to be in these vehicles.
Africa's electric cars market, currently in its infancy, presents a huge opportunity for investment and the creation of green jobs, say experts.
When you look at our source of electricity, it is renewable. You know, for example, in Ethiopia, it's almost 100% renewable energy, hydro and such. If you look at Kenya, it's over 90-something%. So we have the energy, you know, we don't have to import fossil fuels, petrol, diesel and all that. So we have the energy here. Then this is also a very good opportunity for jobs, green jobs.
As pollution and climate emissions from transportation rises, the urgency to transition to sustainable mobility grows, providing benefit for those who make the switch, like bus driver Benjamin Maina. Juma Majanga for VOA News, Nairobi.
And that's our show for today. You can find all the contents at Top News and World News online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I am Paul Indiho in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos, Nigeria.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. To remember that channelsteve.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joke Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.